Hey everybody, off the top rope, off the Mike Sports Network. As I said, I don't usually watch Collision. But I was alerted to something on social media and I saw that Swerve Strickland and Hangman Page were sitting down in a room and I was like, "Oh, okay, I need to go flick this on." So I flick on HBO Max and I watched the entire 5 or so minute segment between Hangman Adam Page and Swerve Strickland that took place. It was seemingly a pre-tape that happened after Dynamite last night on Wednesday. And to say that this, look, I don't think this is even hyperbole. I'm not. Maybe I'm a prisoner of the moment. This is one of the best segments that AEW has ever done. They've done. I'm sure they've done a lot of great in-ring stuff, but in terms of what this does, going into All In Texas, considering the history and all of the back and forth over the last 2 years between these two men, probably the greatest rivalry that AEW has ever done. There's an argument maybe you can make for Kenny Omega, Hangman Adam Page. You could come up with some other options. I think Swerve Strickland and Hangman Page is about as good of a rivalry as you're going to find in AEW history, and it's one of the best in professional wrestling history. And these two have honestly maybe it might have saved some of this build to this pay-per-view, because as I've said, listen, the diehard sickos can justify it all they want. I have not been a fan of AEW and a lot of their booking decisions. I already talked about the decision to basically book the same 8-woman tag that they booked the last 3 weeks. But they paced this out about as well as you possibly could. Swerve was not involved in, he was not involved in anything related to Hangman. They had the confrontation after Hangman won the Owen. There was all these things. There was Swerve and Ospreay in the trainer's room after Ospreay got kicked in the face with a bunch of thumbtacks. And it was all building to this crescendo of, okay, what's going to happen when things come to a head and if they actually get themselves in a room. And Hangman being, I'll just go ahead and say it, and I've said this multiple times, he is the main character of this company. You could talk about MJF being the ace. You could talk about Ospreay being the ace. Hangman is the main character of this place. He has been the main character of this place, even though, in 2023, he kind of fell off a little bit, because he was kind of middling around in the mid card. They did the alliance thing with the Elite. And then, the whole feud started with Swerve. Swerve got over, and Hangman, as a result, he had to turn heel. There was a lot of things that went on. But his character development, really in the last 2 years, has been something to behold. And really, it shines a light on, not only is this guy a great professional wrestler, but this guy, from an emotional perspective, from a talking perspective, some people don't like that he yells. I think it comes across as genuine. I think it comes across as emotional. He's passionate about wrestling. He's a passionate guy about AEW. And, the connection that he has with that audience is unlike anything that you usually get, specifically in AEW from a character perspective, because most of these guys are just wrestlers. Hangman's actually a character, and you can relate to him, even though he's a cowboy. He comes across as a real human being. And so this segment in the locker room that happens where Swerve is resistant initially, and basically what happened for 5 minutes is these two guys hashed out everything that had happened over the last 2 years. And I know some people are hoping for this thing to continue. And maybe this does, and maybe this is all a red herring, and maybe Swerve still screws him at All In. Maybe that happens. I don't know. It seemingly is setting up for Swerve to give the nod of approval, much like the Bucks did back in 2021 at Full Gear when he beat Kenny Omega for his first world championship. That's what this felt like. But I don't know what they're thinking. They could go back to Darby Allin. A lot of people think that that's a possibility. MJF could win the gauntlet and screw over Hangman. That's still very much on the table. There's a lot of ways they can go. And one thing that I've applauded, and I did on my live stream, is they've created a lot of unpredictability on this show where you honestly, in the major matches, you have no fucking idea where this thing is going to go. So Ospreay split them up. Hangman sort of hashes out his side of how he was feeling after Swerve broke into his home. His whole, his family and his kids are still uncomfortable, and he says he hates him for that. And then, both these guys kind of shed some remorse of what had transpired and the people they became in really this blood feud that had transpired over basically since September of 2023. Like, AEW has not done a lot of great long-term booking. This is about as good as it's gotten. So I have to hand it to the people involved here, Tony Khan. They came up with something great here. And hopefully they land the plane at All in Texas, because to me, what that segment told me is that anything less than a Hangman win is going to feel completely and utterly deflating. So it really feels like that's the direction that they need to go. But, and then Swerve basically talking about, hey, maybe we should, he was talking about his childhood home and the whole stuff that he said about, the childhood home being built down. I wanted to raise my kids in that place, but hey, maybe it's time to put things in the past. And it was almost hinting at, hey, and then obviously the chain that's very symbolic in their feud on the floor. Swerve picks up the chain, puts it around his neck. That's been a really symbolic thing. Like, again, this is unlike anything else that AEW produces on their television product. Like, we talked about it last year with Mariah May and Tony Storm. They had really rich history that they built over months. And there has not really been any of that present in AEW for a while. And specifically on the men's side, really the only thing that you can latch on to that has been compelling and gripping television whenever you see these guys in the same ring or around each other is Hangman and Swerve. And these two have just, seriously, I got chills watching this segment. This was as good of a professional wrestling segment as you're going to find in 2025, WWE or AEW, because what it symbolized, what these guys have built through the last 2 years, every time that they've encountered each other, it has been gripping, it has been moving, and it all goes back to my main point of the common thread in this company. When stuff is going good, Hangman Page is near the top. That has always been the thing. I have consistently said this. I said it and even if, some of the build has been kind of funky with Moxley, because I think maybe Ospreay was their initial plan. Hangman has always been in the center of the storm. We saw it literally wins one of the first matches in AEW history, that casino battle royale at Double or Nothing 2019. He challenged for the first world heavyweight title and lost. He then gets incredibly over during COVID and becomes really the ace of this place. And they staggered a build because he had to go home and have his first child. And he could have been at All Out 2021. It probably was a good thing that he wasn't because of all the shit that happened on that show. And then he gets his moment at Full Gear. The CM Punk stuff, him losing the title, is in a lot of ways, and let me be clear, I've been a big, I've always been a CM Punk fan. It was the wrong decision to give him the title, because I think that's really where this company started to falter. The second that happened, because there was feelings that were already hurt going into it, then Punk gets hurt. But Hangman Page has always been in the center of the storm of whenever AEW has produced good content. So he needs to win the championship. I know if Jon Moxley walks out of that stadium as the champion, it's a disaster. But to me, if Hangman Page isn't walking out of that stadium as the champion, that's equally as much of a disaster. Like, if they ham it up with, hey, Darby cashes in with a bunch of interference after that Texas death match, maybe you can say you can get away with that. But the way they set this thing up is that Hangman's got to win. He's got to win. It seems like this is just aligning the stars. Hangman and Swerve are on the same page. Swerve can, basically Hangman saying, hey, I'm bringing my family. He said, yeah, I'll stay out of the way. And it's like, seriously, this was such a great segment. And I love that they waited until to air it till 2 days before the show, because this had been building for a while and you knew that this was going to come up at some point. So I love that they did it this way. I love the way that, they played it up that, hey, it was after, Swerve got involved with, indirectly, I guess, with the whole ending of Dynamite last night. But this, like I said, this was so well executed, and I think it's a testament. And also, let me just not dismiss the other part of this. Swerve Strickland has been fantastic. This has elevated him too. Like, to me, this is one of the great rivalries And what this has done for both men in terms of their character growth, Swerve has become a bigger star. He became world champion basically off of this thing and got really over with the fan base. And then obviously Hangman, like going through the arc of, hey, having to, go with grief and frustration and having to just seeing all these emotions go through this guy and see how emotionally damaged he was for basically 2 years. And now it's all coming to a head with him almost 4 years to the day. I mean, it was going to be 4 years in November, but literally off by 4 months. So basically, you're about three. You're about 3 years, 8 months since he won his first world championship at Full Gear. I think it was in Minneapolis that year, and it was a great cathartic moment for longtime AEW fans. I cannot say enough good things about Hangman Adam Page, just because of the way he is able to grip you in so many different ways. It's not just about his wrestling, which is terrific, by the way. I don't think people give Hangman nearly enough credit for how good of a wrestler he is from bell to bell. But what takes him over the top to me and makes him one of the best in the industry is the way he's able to capture you with his emotions, his facial expressions, the way he talks. Some people think he screams and stuff, but like I said, whereas with other people in this promotion, and you guys can go ahead and name countless names, this guy feels like a real human being and a real character. That's the thing that matters. It feels authentic. It doesn't feel forced, anything like that. And every time I watch this guy, I just am always instantly intrigued. And every time, and then you have to have the perfect dance partner to make something great. And Swerve Strickland is the perfect dance partner. And we'll see how this goes. Like I said, I am not leaving off the table that Swerve just screws him over, because they hash things out, but who knows? But the way that's set up to me tells me that Hangman Adam Page is winning the world title at All in Texas. And if that doesn't happen, holy mackerel, AEW has got a shitstorm on their hands. Even if Darby Allin walks out of the stadium and you give him a happy ending, or whoever wins the gauntlet. Now, I'll say this before I go. If you want to go the route of, messing with people, and I know this would probably not be the greatest way to end the biggest show of the year, MJF winning the gauntlet, Swerve helps Hangman, and then MJF wins. Also, I have no idea if Swerve and Ospreay are going to win their match, because that's going to also cast an interesting shadow over this main event as well. So, but like I said, man, rest of Collision, what happened with Swerve and Swerve and Hangman over that 5 or so minutes backstage that was taped yesterday, some of the best content AEW has produced this year or any year, because it's character driven. It actually felt real. It was a long running feud, storytelling. This is what I clamor for with this place, and they don't do it enough. Why can't this happen more often? But hey, can't wait for Saturday, because that made me much more interested in this match. I mean, I was already hyped up for it. I'm still a little worried, but we'll see. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.